Right, let's do one of the teams that has a player change, because I think this will be an interesting one. So obviously XL, look, they already over the last split also been making the change anyway. They brought in Abidage, they got Limit instead of Targamas. We'll talk later about where Vethio went. But they've also made another change, which is Cersei, who was mega flamed, obviously, by pretty much everyone across the board. He's out, and this guy Peach is in, this Korean jungler. Right, what are your thoughts just on that initially? This is someone who basically, when I look it up, he used to play on like the DRX Academy team a few years ago, and he was on UOL, who in like, I'm assuming like an ERL or some shit like that, or LCL or something. So is this a person, are you aware of him? Do you have any background info on him, or what expectations we should have?
I've watched one best of 5 of Peach in my entire life. I watched the EU Masters best of 5. Can't even remember who they played against right now off the top of my head, but I watched one play from him where he was playing Vi, his top lane was mega stomping, and he just Q flashed into the turret, whiffed his Q flash, died, fed double buffs to the enemy laner, and just left. Like that was all I saw out of this guy. So I'm not hopeful, to say the least, of like how good this guy is going to be. Also, I think that right now, when you look at the team, I can kind of understand the logic of bringing in a Korean jungler. You feel like there's not enough activity, so you're bringing in somebody who hopefully can be more active and just like force kind of random plays, because you just didn't have that that ability in the previous team to actually force things on the map. It seems like Xerxes was best at playing like stable games and around winning lanes, and in general he was more of an efficiency based jungler. So maybe you have somebody who's willing to make more plays now, and it frees up some of the other players. But I just can't imagine this team being good. I can't imagine Odo, Patrick, and Abidage like having that X factor that's going to make them a top tier team. I just feel like in general they're too similar in terms of the way that they play the game, and in general that is not a super effective way to play League of Legends right now. Obviously, if things change and we end up in a more like stable scaling control mage meta, maybe. But right now the meta is like Gragas, Annie mid, playmaking mid laners, Ahri. Like you're supposed to just play for early fights, play for Drake fights, play for Herald fights, and their coordination was awful in every type of like Drake fight, every Baron fight. Anytime that they had to group up and like find picks or know who to engage on, that was just this team's major weakness. So I don't have much faith in XL. I mean, I don't think they'll be as bad. Like I wouldn't predict them going 10th. Actually, I mean, they could be
teasing it. I might have picked them to go 10th, but we'll see. We'll see on that.
Yeah, one. No, I mean, no, they could go 10th. Never mind. I stand corrected. Yeah, they're probably just the worst team.
I mean, one of the problems they're going to have as a team when I look at it is they already, with those, like, even though those are all players who've been like among the top players at the 3 lanes of the top mid and the ADC, the supportive elements are just sauce. Like, Limit's all right, but he's never really found the form of the old SK Limit, and when he was with Crownie and that, like that, even like briefly when he was in Schalke, he's never really found that again. Also, I don't know if he works that well with Patrick. That lane just generally didn't look that good in general, mate. Like, I don't hate on Patrick. He still seems like he was probably the best player on the team most of the time, but that doesn't say much. This team was really fucking bad. This team, even when they made the original one, was that classic thing of they are the like less than the sum of their parts. Some other players made each other worse. And then also, like, if you just look at the squad, like, I think people were really reaching on the Abidage one. I can see why a team would take a chance on him. He's someone who's been a good player in the past and has had strong performances. But you can tell, Dom, that people didn't watch Abidage in fucking LCS that last year or so. Like, mate, even when they made some of those playoff runs, he would just be shit the whole split, and then he would just sort of get it together sort of for some of the series. And even then, he was never the best mid for those last few ones. Like, I thought he was kind of he looked a bit washed in LCS, to be frank. So I get that Vethio was doing so badly. And spoiler, if you haven't noticed yet, guys, the fucking Tim Reichardt guy was the Schalke guy. She just brought all the Schalke boys back. That's all these fucking Limit, all these, they're all back in the team now. So to me, it's like, I get why they did the pickup, but people who thinking he was going to like ride in like fucking Gandalf the White and save the day, I don't think it's going to happen. So maybe he could be an okay mid laner. But what does an okay mid laner get you on this team? Probably like 9th or 10th. Like, it's probably nothing.
Yeah, I mean, also the meta right now is playing a bunch of enchanters. It's playing Milio, Yuumi, Lulu, Nami, like Nami with Lucian. You're playing all these enchanters over and over again. If you're playing all these enchanters over and over again, Limit is one of the worst players to have on your team. Like, his whole strength was he was a poor man version of Hilly with like the Nautilus, Leona, that type of stuff. And his advantage, or like his talent, was that he was able to find good roams and make plays around the map. It's just not available right now. Like, people are just playing enchanters over and over again. So if that is how the game is structured, and you have like a tank top player, your AD carry is like middle of the pack or lower. Middle of the pack is generous, right? Like if he plays well, I think he's middle of the pack. Then your support's not really an enchanter player. You have a new jungler that has potentially language barrier. I'm not sure. I mean, I think he's only been in UOL for like one split now or something. I just don't see how this team is going to be good. Like, how are they not going to just look the same as they looked last split, where they're just out of sorts? You know, even if they get early leads, they can't close the game. It's just going to be the same team.
Plus, you guys are all hearing, oh, they've got a Korean jungler, and you're thinking of like Malrang. So you're thinking, oh, Korean jungler, Peach. You're thinking, juicy. I'm just thinking, could just be arse. Straight fire there, whatever. Instagram shout out.
Okay.
That's why I'm going to say that. But guys, the joke is Malrang didn't actually make it in the long run. Like, he actually did decay split on split on split. They even sort of like timed it perfectly, where he had that one inspired low bracket run to win the fucking summer split last year. But beyond that, I actually do think that it's with good reason that people are very skeptical, particularly at jungle, to import Koreans, because it's the role that like requires communication. It requires you to be on the same page. It requires you to understand like even concepts like you're playing in a more flawed sort of setup than in Korea. Like you're not playing in some fucking team where everyone's playing some high level macro game, and it's like you're actually, it's like the logic of why I always say people who watch pro play but who are bad in League of Legends, half the time they complain about being like stuck in like gold or whatever. It's like you're actually trying to make like LPL players that A, you couldn't pull off, and B, none of your teammates are on that level. Like they couldn't do any of that shit. You actually have to in some ways like play worse to actually win the game, if you know what I mean, at lower ranks. So to me, I'm always mega nervous about Koreans, particularly coming in at jungle, mate. That's the one position I think it's going to be so tough to make that work. People are going to think because the Malrangs of the world have done it, or Rain Over or whatever, but the old school examples, like it's going to work. Like if you can make it work, God bless. But I think it's a hard role to go and put someone into.
100%. I mean, just look at one of the best junglers in the entire world champion Pioshik playing in TL. He just couldn't get over the language barrier on that team. He just wasn't able to communicate with his teammates because they're all Americans. So that was just tough. You know, we've seen better players fail. So how is he going to succeed?
Bro, I think Steve must have spent too much time around Reggie, because he's caught whatever Reggie has, where all of his fucking Asian imports are just ass, mate. Like, this guy used to be one of the best ever at signing the big names. Now, where the joke is, he just signs the big names. Like, mate, whatever agent signed off on that deal for Pioshik, I bet he could barely even... Oh, sorry, are you okay? Oh, sorry, yeah. I've got to sign my name. Shit, called it together. Sign the name. This is, we look forward to another Worlds run with Team Liquid. Like, give me a break.
Well, I mean, it's also
inflated. He's just getting down. He's coming out the second-hand car dealership, Dom, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this bad boy here can fit all sorts of worlds and like LCK and everything." And then they get halfway down the road, and he's been sold a lemon. There's all bits of like wood shavings just popping out the engine. He's like, "What the fuck? I thought this was a prime Pioshik." It's like, nah, mate. The fucking carburetor's gone. Transmission shit. It's over, mate. It's over.
It's just weird because when you look at the imports that you end up getting in LCS, just on this tangent, it's like they pick the most flawed players out of Asia to bring them over. It's like when you look at Pioshik and you look at Summit, it's like these were the players that had the most like glaring weaknesses out of all the Asian players that they could have been potentially like playing with. If you look at even players like, for example, like even somebody like Mowgli when he came over, he was somebody who made sense. Like he looked like he was a more complete player, where Pioshik, it's like, okay, well, he can kind of play around lanes, but he's like really fucking terribly mechanically sometimes, and he has like these massive things where that doesn't work in LCS. Like if you're going to succeed in LCS, if you're going to succeed in LEC, it seems like you have to have the complete game and then just like adapt to whatever the team is. Like you need to be able to carry when you need to carry. You just have to have all the aspects, because you can't just exist within like, oh, I'm just going to do what I'm good at and everything else will come together. Like teams don't work like that over here, which is why I think you saw like Malrang eventually like fall off. Why, Bo, who's like the mechanical genius, like, but he, was kind of a flipper. He hasn't had that success. It feels like you need the guy that's got the all around game, or you're just fucking doomed when you're imported. You can't rely on your teammates who are not imports to cover for your weaknesses.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.